Whether you're a professional tiler or a DIY enthusiast, chances are you want to know the best tiling tools that you need in your tiling toolbox. So in this video, I'm going to run through many different categories, including PPE, power tools, hand tools, everything that you need to get started, all the way up to a bunch of items that I didn't even find out about after 8 years that changes the tiling game forever. I'm going to start with the most boring but probably the most important category of this whole video, PPE. And I'm not talking about a hard hat or a high vis, I'm talking about dust masks, I'm talking about eyewear. Now the most important thing here is this dust mask. Over recent years there's been lots of studies now showing how silica is causing things such as silicosis and even lung cancer because of the exposure without wearing protective gear like this. You need to get yourself a P3 rated protective mask, and this is going to do a much better job at giving you more longevity in life whilst you're working. Next up, eyewear, ear defenders. People laugh at me sometimes when I've had ear defenders on, but the truth of it is over time, the loud noises of grinding tiles and hammering tiles off with, it's gonna damage your ears and it's gonna damage your eyes. This here, I've got a blade. That is a blade that has chipped on the corner here. Lucky for me, this didn't happen whilst I was using it, but if it did, I'd have had my glasses on, and if it was to try and enter my eye, the glasses would have saved me. There's plenty of horrific videos and photos online if you wanna give yourself a little scare before you start using a grinder. Next up, knee protection. I started tiling without using knee protection for years, and I'm not joking. I started when I was 18. By the age of 20, my knee started playing up. This is great to just have down next to you, manual tile cutter if you have it on the floor, if you haven't got it on a table. And these are preferred to just have within the bathroom. You can lean on one knee at a time, whatever. They're great, they're comfy, they're gonna protect your knees. My most asked question is how to cut tiles, and so I'm going to answer that in the next 2 sections of this video. First up, power tools, and how do you do your L cuts, your U cuts and all of that. Actually, we're going to be doing a video that's going to be answering all of those in much more detail, but in this video I'm going to show you all of my favourite tools that I use. I have got 2 corded Makita grinders, which comes with a blade guard, and so this goes around your grinder like this, and the blade will sit inside the guard. As well as using these 2 Makita grinders, I usually have one set up with a blade and one set up with a flat disc. This is a tool you won't see many tilers using unless you're looking up into the much higher end side of tiling. This grinder is for very intricate cuts, such as cutting holes out the centre of tiles that are very small. Something that falls into the same category as all of this is a multi-tool. This is a Stormforce multi-tool. It's not expensive. I picked it up for 45 quid. It came with all of the attachments, and these are the little drilling attachments that can fit right into the end of there or into the proxim. It's generally just a really good multi-tool that you can put in your ceramic pieces. These are 4 of my favourite grinders. These 2 are exactly the same. And the reason why I have these is because I have one with a blade on and I have one with a flat disc on. And you've got to remember, when you're on a project, time is money. Anyway, where you can save yourself some time whilst you're on your project, you can pick one of these up for about 50, 60 pounds, and you have 2 of them, and over time, you're not going to be fumbling around trying to swap all of your blades over. Right, this is a really exciting part of this video. This here is what I get asked the most about. This is, I think it's like a 3mm mitre blade. You can see that it's all honeycombed around the outside. And so what this is for mitering. And it might be that you haven't tried mitering before, but this for me was a massive realisation. And the reason why this is so good is it's got an M14 nut on the inside of this blade, as well as all of my hole cutters. What this does is it allows for you to screw on your hole cutter to a grinder, and these have much more power than a drill does. This M14 attachment mitre blade screws straight onto your grinder, and what it means is that you don't have a nut on the face of it which can doink your mitre whilst you're cutting it. Now that's quite a specialist blade. Aside from that, we've got other blades in front of us, like this 1mm Ruby blade. We've got other cool blades like this. This is a little mini Viper blade, once again by Ruby. This is great for doing smaller cuts, cutting around plug sockets, all of that sort of stuff. If you're not looking to spend a lot of money on something to keep all of your really expensive blades nice and safe, get yourself a CD case. In this CD case, I've once again got a massive collection of blades. Here, we've got the best blade I've ever used, which yes, it's once again from Torva. This is a 1mm precision blade. I'm not joking, once you wear this in, this pretty much cuts chipless. Now let's talk the difference between a normal blade, such as these, and a flap disc. Blades are all used for cutting lines through tiles or cutting pieces of tile off, such as your miters, making a tile look a lot better after you've cut it. This is a very used flap disc. This is a little bit more of a fresh flap disc. And on this, you'll be able to see the reason why we call it a flap disc is there are little diamond flaps around the outside. And what you do is you pop it onto a grinder like this, you put your nut on, you screw that on like that, clamp that down, boom. You could have ended up ripping a bit of tile off on your manual tile cutter, and it could just be coming up a little bit sharp on the edge where you're going to be putting your trim on the side of it. You can use this to just polish the side of it up rather than using your hand polishing pads. It's much quicker. And then with a miter, this is basically the deal breaker with a miter to get it millimeter perfect. It's a no-brainer to have one of these in your tiling toolbox. When it comes down to hole cutters, there are so many different sizes. Every size you want, you can get hold of. We've got our Ruby ones, we've got our Torva ones. I've got a 115 millimeter one. This is for cutting around toilet wastes. And once again, these all come with an M14 attachment, so you can put it straight onto your grinder. It's a little bit trickier to use if you're not used to using a grinder to cut your holes, but if you can get used to it, these tend to last a lot longer. You've got a lot more power within it as well, rather than using a drill, which I used to use when I was on site, but now I would never go back to doing that. If you did want to use a drill and you have your M14 attached, you want to just have it a little bit slower and maybe you're using it with a thinner tile, you can get this, which this bit will go straight into your drill, and this bit is the M14 thread, which goes straight into here and put it straight into your drill. So you could just use it like this. I'm not a massive fan of this method now. Once you get used to using a grinder, you're probably not going to go back to doing this. You're never going to be able to complete a tiling project without cutting your tiles. So that's why you're going to need an angle grinder, and you're also going to need some form of manual tile cutter. Now, the difference between angle grinders and manual tile cutters is that these are purely for doing straight cuts. This is the Ruby TS40, and I've also got the Ruby TX70. This is obviously a bigger tile cutter than the Ruby TS40, but that isn't the only difference. Oh, where's the snapping handle? It's over there. The snapping handle. So this is actually the difference between this and this, pretty much, apart from a couple of other little things. So this gets set up by slotting this in, and what that does is it brings this clamp down to break the tile. This is the rail. So most Rubies operate on a double rail system, and you can see your scribing wheel, which is down here. This can be unturned to release your scribe wheel. You can get different sizes of scribe wheels as well. And the reason why there's different sizes of scribe wheels is to deal with different types of tiles. A smaller, thinner wheel has less surface area, which allows you to penetrate through the tile better. With a bigger wheel, you tend to be able to travel through textured tiles much easier because the little wheel isn't getting stuck in the rivets in the tile. And so really, it's a good idea to get yourself a couple of different sizes that is compatible with your manual tile cutter to try out with different tiles before your project. The reason why I've chose to show you these two different manual tile cutters is because these are my two favourite ones. The TS40 is great for kitchen splashbacks, for smaller tiles, easier to move around, smaller tighter spaces, etc. Whereas this is a beast, absolute beast. Anything up to 700 millimeters this tile will cut, and they claim to be able to cut through 15, sometimes even 20 mil porcelain, but I wouldn't bank on it if you did have a 20 mil porcelain project. How this cutter operates is once again on a double rail system, and this is a little bit sticky, and I'm going to show you a little tip to stop that shortly. The difference between this cutter and this cutter is rather than having a breaker handle at the top to activate the breaker, what we've got is we have got a trigger. And as you can hear as I'm lifting up the handle, what the lifting up of that handle is doing is it's activating the breaker. When I lift this up, these things are clicking in, and you come down and you can break through your tile. When you want to activate your wheel again, you're always going to be at this end of the tile cutter. And so once you've broke the tile, boom, and we're ready to scribe again. Now I said I'm going to show you a little bit of a tip to get these all lubricated again. Now for years I was using just standard WD-40, which honestly, it was working. I was like, this is fine. But the other day I had a visit from Ross from Sigma, and he told me that you shouldn't be using normal WD-40 as it has anti-rusting properties in there, and it can actually start eating away at these rubber washers and some of like the materials that the bearings are in contact with. This. Now, yes, it is still WD-40, but it's the silicone version, right? This stuff is made to be in contact with bearings. So whether you're using a Ruby, a Sigma, a Montolet, whatever it is, this is the lubricant that you want to be using on your tile cutter. And now we're all lubricated again. It's literally as simple as that. You can even put a little bit on your wheel. And then you're literally good to go again. Now you're probably sitting there thinking, what is the best tile cutter? What tile cutter should you get? Blah, 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 blah. If you want a little bit more information on that, I'm gonna leave a link down in the description below, which is gonna be my 5 favorite tile cutters, which goes into a little bit more depth, so maybe it can help you choose what manual tile cutters for you. If you're doing a tiling project, you're gonna need to be mixing some adhesive. And if you rewound to me 10 years ago when I was on site, you'd have seen me mixing it with one of these, but don't be like me. At bare minimum, you want to have yourself a drill with a battery in it and a little paddle mixer. When you're starting out, you're probably going to want a drill anyway, and you can pick up a paddle mix like this, which I've been looking after really well, and this is what you can use to just stick it in a bucket. You can use it to mix your grout. I'd even suggest having a couple of different ones, one for your adhesive, one for your light grouts, one for your dark grouts. This I will still use on smaller tiling projects such as kitchen splashbacks. The amount of adhesive that you need to mix up is so minimal over time really that this is perfect. I wouldn't ever be getting one of these out for a small tiling project. If you're tiling a large area such as a floor or even a bathroom, if you're working with big tiles, you do not want to be using a drill and a paddle mixer. It's going to end up blowing up. You want to get yourself a proper big mixer just like this, and you can get all different brands. I think this one was £100. You can go anywhere up to like 600 quid on a cordless big mixer. This is fine, this is perfect. If you've got a big project, invest in one of these. Do not be mixing it up with your bloody bucket trowel like I was. Invest in a good mixer, it's gonna save you time. Let's talk about spacers, packers, clips, wedges, and all that good stuff. I got taught without any of this, but as time's gone on, when you're working with larger tiles and the quality of some of the tiles nowadays are really poor and tend to be bananaed, you need things in place to make sure your tiles don't move when you go home at night. Let's just start off with the basics of spacers. In between each of your tiles, you need to create a space for the grout to sit in. My 2 favourite types of spacer, you've got a horseshoe shim and you've just got a standard long-legged cross spacer. These are great. You can just use them as a normal space. You can put them in the crosses in between your tiles if you're doing stacked pattern, or you can just put the leg in if you're doing half bond, whatever. The horseshoe shim, on the other hand, one of the best things about these is they're reusable. Obviously they're sustainable, it's good for the environment. These they tend to get encaked in adhesive and they get shoveled up in a pile, and I'm sorry, who's gonna be sitting there scraping adhesive off these and washing them down? It's so easy to sweep them up and chuck them in a bin. These, I don't know what it is, they get covered in adhesive, I chuck them in a bucket of water, and you do just find yourself reusing them much more. The fact that they're longer and they're really bendy, right? Look how much I'm bending that and it's not snapping. So when it's going in between a tile and I'm pulling on it, the whole thing comes out. What can happen a lot of the time if you put a cross spacer in, the legs come off and then the legs get stuck in your grout joint, and then you start trying to pull out the bits of plastic in. But a guy literally sent me a photo the other day and was like, Jack, how do I get these out from between my tiles? I said, you got to cut it out with a Stanley blade. What happens then? You start trying to cut it out with a Stanley blade, you've got hundreds of bits of plastic in there, you lose your temper, you slip, you chip a tile. This doesn't happen with these. Something I didn't get introduced to as a tiler are these. Most of the time we see carpenters using these, we see other trades using them. I never really saw any tilers using them. All these are is it's just a selection of assorted sizes of plastic packers. You could even use a pair of snips and cut them down into smaller pieces, but these literally go up in millimeter gauges. So they're great, they're so handy. You're probably looking at these thinking, oh my God, I can just incorporate that into my job so easily. You can, you probably can. That is all the spacers and the packers out of the way. In tiling, especially on a large floor, you cannot leave any room for error for lippage of tiles or any movement overnight. Or once again, if the size of the tile isn't great or it's bananaed, you tend to be able to use tiling clips like these to rectify those issues. There's actually an ongoing argument within the tiling community. You should be using clips. You shouldn't be using clips. Using clips ruins the art of tiling. Where? Guys, if you want to use clips, use clips. If you're confident enough and you feel like you don't need to use clips, then don't use them. But how do clips work? So these are standard wedge clips. This bit here goes underneath your tile, as I've just done there. When you're tiling, you'll be like, adhesive down, you put your tile down, and then what you'll do is you'll slip these underneath. So then, when your next tile comes down on top, and it goes on top like this. You know what? You might even want one in the middle as well, depending on how big your tiles are. Now how this works is your wedge then comes in underneath, and it goes in like that. And what that does is the wedge forces this to pull up against the bottom of the tile, which then pulls the two faces of your tiles together level, and more importantly, it stops them from moving until the adhesive has gone off. And then the following day you come in with a mallet, doink doink, and you just pop these off. Now there is a downside with this, and I don't use these types of clips anymore. And the reason why is, especially if you're using some cheap shit tiles like these, chances are is when you hit that off, it's gonna end up chipping your tile because they're weak. If you're working with thick porcelain, you can get away with it a little bit easier, but it does happen. I spoke to many people and they've pulled away from using clips like this. I stopped using systems like what I've just showed you quite a while ago for all of the reasons what I've already said. And what I tend to use more of now are these. They don't come in this lovely bucket. They tend to come in a nice box. These are made by Bowie, whatever. Everybody says it differently. If you've tried tiling before and you've used T-clips, you may have seen the cheap Amazon ones that you can get, the orange ones. Now the problem with those in comparison to these is that with these T-clips, all you have to do is you have to put it down through the tiles and you turn it so that the T bit hooks up behind the tile. And all you have to do is you have to just turn this little knob on the top, and that does the same thing. What that does is it forces the T to wind up into the clip, pulling the two faces of the tiles level with the top of this. With the cheap ones, what you have to do is you put the T in and then you spin this face. Now what that can do, and if you're watching this and you've done it before, you're going to agree with me that when you do that, once you get it tight, as you're turning it, it starts to warp and move your grout joint. That is just not what you want. The whole reason why we're using these clips is to hold them in position where we want them. And then if you end up tightening it up to the point of just where you want it and it moves the grout joint, it's annoying. And more importantly, if you do it and you're moving it and you just don't quite realise that it's moved it, and then over a couple of hours when you go home, it just slowly moves it by a millimetre. You come in the next morning, your adhesive's gone off and it's moved the damn joint. These don't do that. These are what I use all the time now. I've got probably 150 of these clips. I never get through all of them in a day. It's a little bit more of an investment, but they're highly reusable. You can get the pins in here. There's one thing I missed out of that video, and that is a wedge. Now, it's a form of a spacer, and what these are great for is if you're getting your bottom course of tiles in, or once again you're working with a tile that is uneven or just not great, and you need to open the joint up a little bit, or you need to push it up a little bit at the bottom. These wedges allow you to have micro adjustments of millimeters so that you can make your tiling project perfect. Now it's important for me to mention that I am just brushing the surface of a lot of these different categories, and over the coming weeks we're going to be releasing lots of different videos diving deep into every single one of these subjects. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this. And also if there's anything here that you want to get your hands on, check the description below because we're going to link everything that we rate down there. I've done my best to try and put all of these tools into the best categories as possible. So I've linked up some measuring tools and some leveling tools. Now at bare minimum, when it comes down to keeping your levels throughout a bathroom or even when tiling a floor, you need to be using spirit levels. There's not one tiler on this planet that shouldn't have spirit levels in their toolbox. Here I've got the trade series of Ox. These aren't overly expensive. They're not super cheap either. The reason why I like these for tiling, other brands of spirit levels can be a little bit thick. And so when you're putting them onto the top of your tile, you really have to look underneath to see whether the top of the tiles are touching the bottom part of the level. Whereas with these, because they're thinner, when you put them on top of your tiles to make sure they're level, you don't have to go too far under because the level isn't overhanging the tiles. And so these are really good. I think they're great for tiling and they're not too expensive. As well as using these, you can start to use your laser levels. Here I've got a Hoopar laser level, fantastic piece of kit and incredibly affordable as well. It took me years to start using a laser level when tiling a bathroom, mostly because I was put off by the price and just trying something new. I really am a creature of habit. When it came down to using a laser level on my project, this changed everything. What this is going to do is it's going to allow you to see that laser coming all the way around the room. One of the best things about these is that if you put a pencil line on the wall, when you put your pencil line on the wall, if you spread adhesive over your pencil line is gone. If you have a laser level and your laser is running up the wall and you put adhesive through it, your laser's just going to go straight on top of the adhesive. You can't adhesive over the top of a laser. It's always going to be there no matter what. So you're never going to lose your level. Something like this is just massive for a beginner because it reduces your chance of error. So to summarise the category of levelling tools, at bare minimum, if you're doing DIY at home or you're doing a little project, a little splashback, or even if you are just doing a bathroom, I use these for years. If you want to splash out a little bit more money, a laser level doesn't just have to be used on a tiling project, it can be used on all of your DIY projects. When you're measuring your bathroom and you want to be measuring for the amount of tiles you need, or if you're centering a wall for setting out, anything, you need to use a tape measure. You cannot tile anything without using a tape measure. You've got to measure your tiles so you know how much you've got to take off it. You've got to measure your wall to know how to center it where you're coming out from. You need a tape. So at bare minimum, have a tape. I recently invested in a big long meter ruler as well. What I use this for a lot of the time is drawing straight lines through tiles rather than using the spirit level, sorry. It's just handy to have. And also within the measuring category, we have got a positioning square. But what does this do? It allows you to make sure that you're nice and square. Something I use set squares for a lot in tiling is when I'm running my marks through to cut a hole out of a tile, for example, you want to be using a set square to make sure that you're running flush off the side of the tile to be able to get your mark in. I can do this in a later video as well when I do some content on how to cut holes in tiles. You'll see me using these to transfer those lines through the tile to get an accurate hole cut. Hand tools. A lot of the hand tools that I've got in front of me are literally fossilized in adhesive. This one hasn't been very well looked after, but it has been used a lot. If we start off with trowels, this is just a standard soldered fixed ruby trowel covered in adhesive, been used a lot. It's 10 mil. 10 mil is a good size trowel to use most of the time, especially when doing the average floor or bathroom walls. Now here, this is a Genesis trowel with exchangeable blades. It came with 8 different blades. So it comes with your 10, your 6, your 4. I think there's a 2 mil in there. It also comes with a U-knot blade, a tiger trowel. It's actually a really good piece of kit for your first set of blades. You can pick it up for like 30 quid or something, whereas this costs like 15 quid per trowel. So with something like this, you get lots of different options. Amazing for you DIYers. If you don't want to be going and splashing out on loads of different trowels, you can put all your blades nice and neatly in the box. That screws. That slides into there, believe it or not, and it just sits in there nicely. Nice and tight, nice and clean. Let's talk about hand polishing pads. After you have scribed and cut your tile on a manual tile cutter, you've even butchered the side of it with your angle grinder, you're probably going to want to polish the side of it up. You can get yourself some hand polishing pads. We've got a 60 grit, we've got a 200 grit, 120, 400. We've got loads of them. We love hand polishing pads. The lower the grit, the more coarse the pad is. The higher the grit, such as this 400, the less coarse the pad is. And so if you're working on ceramic tiles, you can get away with using a lower grit because there's less snag in there, because it's a softer material. When you're rubbing a high grit along the side of it, you tend to just eat away into the ceramic and it doesn't really affect the action of doing it. Whereas what my point is if you were to use a really high grit like this on a porcelain after scribing it, from my experience, it tends to snag more because it's a much harder tile. Try it out, see how it works for you. I think have hand polishing pads in your toolbox is a no-brainer for polishing up the sides before you stick some trim on the side of it. Anything that's on show, you want to make sure that it's not chipped and it's nice and buffed up. Now within a bathroom, there's two ways you can finish an external corner. You can either mitre it on a 45-degree angle, or you can put some trim on the edge of there. But to cut your trim, you're going to need, at bare minimum, a hacksaw and a mitre block. To be able to take the back out of your trim before you install it so it doesn't snag on the ceiling or the floor, is you're just going to need some you're going to need some trim snips. This is so you can just cut the little arm that comes out from behind the trim, making it nice and neat and easier to handle. When you are tiling, you're going to make a mess. You're going to end up spreading over your line, and adhesive's going to come up from behind the tile. You might want to dollop some adhesive onto the wall without sticking your trowel in your bucket of adhesive. Scrapers. Like, if you have scrapers in your toolbox, you're going to use them. You're going to be like, oh, what am I going to scrape that bit of adhesive with? Oh, they're just really handy. Take my word for it. Using scrapers when tiling, extremely handy. A chisel, when it's not absolutely caked in adhesive like this one is, it's really good to use a chisel to get underneath the tiles and just slightly prise it up, and you can pop a wedge in there, because tiles, especially when they're stuck to a wall of adhesive and they've got stacks of tiles on top of, you try and get your arm underneath and start just pushing it up, they're not gonna move. If you can put your chisel underneath and prise it up, you can get a spacer in there, and you just give yourself that extra little bit of pressure and leverage. Nips. I don't really know how often people use these anymore, but I got taught to use nips, and it's basically a way where you can just eat away at a little bit of tile. You know, if you don't want to run downstairs and go and get on the grinder, if you work, I mean, God, if you're working in an apartment and you've got to go out of the door, run downstairs, blah, 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 you will use these as often as you can, because it saves you jumping on the grinder. There's not much dust really, it just crumbles away, and you can just eat away at a little oval or take a corner off a tile or a little bit off the bottom without having to go and jump on the grinder. For handling your tiles, you might want to use a tile sucker. I started using these when I was working with the larger tiles and like 600 porcelains, you know, still really handy to use. Once I started using these, I then started using them on much smaller tiles, such as 600 by 300 tiles. And why? The simple answer is that once it's stuck on there, how can you get more control than that over a tile? I've got one hand. If I was to just hold the size of this and there was adhesive all over the back of it, literally, imagine this, right? How am I going to hold this tile if I'm... You can just do whatever you want with it. You can handle it so well. It's so strong. And once it's on the wall, I promise you, you're never just gonna all day just put a tile on the wall and be like, oh, that's in the right place, doink, oh, that's in the right place, doink, oh, that's in the right place. You're constantly gonna be fiddling around and moving your tiles and having to clean up, take tiles off the wall. If you need to take a tile off the wall that's stuck on the wall, you get your handy scrape, stick it behind, peel it back, got your tile in your hand. If you do not have a sucker like this, you're going to get covered in adhesive, and then you're going to go and pick up your mobile phone and you're going to get adhesive all in your speaker, and then you're going to comb your hair because you're all stressed and you're going to have adhesive everywhere. Guys, if you have a sucker in your toolbox and you learn to use it properly, or even a small one like this, it's going to save you getting messy. It's going to save your hands and your fingernails and everything, because you're going to have more control over your tiles. When you've eventually finished your tiling projects, you're going to come to grouting, and you're going to need a grout float. This grout float is unreal, and it's actually made for epoxy grouts, but I use this all the time now. There's some circumstances where you might want to use a softer float, but I just love using a hard float like this, rubber float. But either way, you're going to need to get yourself a grout float. Now, behind my hand lies the greatest tiling tool of all time, and that is the toothbrush. And I'm not even joking. The toothbrush has changed everything for me. Using a toothbrush allows you to scrape adhesive out from in between your tiles. And so whether you've been tiling or you're a DIY enthusiast, when you're tiling, you're going to have adhesive cream up in between your grout joints. And using a wet toothbrush, you dunk it in your bucket of water, and then you can scrape all of the adhesive out. If you're mitering tiles, when you push your mitre together, you're gonna end up having adhesive oozing out in between the mitre. So you can use your toothbrush. If you check out my Instagram page, you see me use the toothbrush all of the time. It's gonna allow you to be cleaner in the moment. And then when you come down to your finishing touches, such as your grout or your resin work, everything's gonna be nice and clean. If you have adhesive in between your grout joint or even your mitre, mate, when you come to use a Stanley blade to scrape all of that that out, you are really going to risk chipping your tile or even your mitre, which is going to cost you hours and hours of time putting it right again. Get yourself a toothbrush for 25p and save yourself time down the long run. That is all, everybody. That is everything I think you should have in your tiling toolbox, whether you're a DIY enthusiast, a professional or a beginner tiler. Go and get it. From the very basics all the way to the advanced stuff. I hope you've enjoyed it. Let me know if you think I'm missing anything down in the comments below, and I'll see you on the next one.